What's cracking, people? Angelic Mayhem here. So, welcome to Curvy 3D. In this video, I'm going to be talking about how to convert a game asset into a low poly. Alright, so what we're going to do here is I've created a little just generic NPC female character that, doesn't have any clothes at the moment, but this is the file that you would keep separate, that's kind of like your base mesh, and then you would add clothing and hats and accessories and things like that to make each one unique. But this is kind of like the shell, the beginning of it, as it were. Now, to begin, let's do a couple of things here. First of all, we want to select our mesh, and then I'm just going to get rid of the outline so that you can, just see it normally. I'm also going to turn on wireframe. This is basically, it's all about eliminating the faces and edges and vertices that we don't need. Alright, so in order to do that, we're going to keep an eye on our mesh. Now I'm going to introduce a new tool to you. This is the Select Mask Brush. Okay, and basically what is the difference between this and what we've been using, which was the mask rectangular. The brush basically, well, that's way too big, isn't it? Okay, let's go with that. So basically what you do is you actually paint the part that you want to select, okay? And where that differs is, let's say that I use this, okay? Do you see how it actually goes through and also selects something on the other side, okay? Obviously that's going to be bad because we only want to select exactly what we're looking at. So in this case, what I want to do, spacebar to deselect, and we'll use the brush to paint that area, and then if we flip around, you see that nothing on the other side is selected. Okay, so it only selects what you're actually looking at. Now, one of the things is that, let's say that this brush was really tiny, okay, and I went up here into this area, which has like a lot of very wide vertices. This is more medium poly than anything else. If I use this tool, it will actually begin to subdivide those edges and create a very high-res mesh, okay? So what we want to do is we want to keep our brush size pretty large, okay? That way, that doesn't happen, okay? But for right now, let's get rid of that. And I want to go back in here, and I want to select all of this. Now, this is clearly a pocket of super high poly, and the reason why this is here is because at one point I probably mirrored this, and then I wanted to smooth out, any of the artifacts that were bumping off the sides or whatever. So what I did was I went into smooth and smoothed it out. Well, as part of the smooth tool, what happens is it makes all of these little subdivisions automatically, and thus converts your low poly into a high poly mesh. So now I have to go back and I have to undo that. The way that we're going to do that is we're going to go into Reduce, and we're just going to go down 25%. See what that looks like. That looks about correct. In terms of, like the rest of this mesh being medium poly, this looks accurate in terms of it should blend in now. But you can see that the vertices are all over the place. So how would we correct that? Well, there actually is another tool called the Relax tool, okay? And you can see the shortcut for that is Control R. So what I'm just going to do is, while this is still selected, I'm just going to hit Control R over and over and over again, and that will bring all of these vertices into a nice even feel. And you can see that it maintains the shape, right? So we haven't lost anything. And there's still a little bit of high poly here, so I'd have to touch that up, a little bit more. But you can see, obviously, this whole area has been corrected now, so that's not going to be a problem. Now, where you're going to want to actually keep the high-res stuff is in your details, okay? So these little pockets, like in here, okay, we don't need, oh, we can go a little smaller than that. We don't need all of these vertices, okay? But what we do need is to maintain this brow ridge, all right? Because the difference between a female face and a male face is that females have a very rounded eye at where the brow is versus dudes who have like a very squared off features, including the brow. So we want to kind of maintain that curve. And in order to do that, we need to maintain these vertices, okay? Now we can wipe out, vertices in these areas and make them super low poly to save, in terms of the vertice count and things like that. But for the most part, and let me finish selecting all this. Mesh, reduce. We're only going to go down maybe 25%. And we'll reduce that. That still looks good. So my advice to you would be to be careful when using the relax tool, because what will happen is the relax tool just will naturally begin to remove, say like for instance, the peak in the nose, okay? If I were to relax that, and let's actually do that. You see how it starts to round it off? That's actually a bad thing, right? Because we don't necessarily want her to have a clown nose. We want her to have, you know, the nose that she started with. There. So the rounding tool is nice and it comes in very handy, but it can also be detrimental if you have an area that needs to maintain it's a certain shape, or if it needs to maintain a certain amount of detail. Now where you don't need detail, for instance, is in the neck. Okay, so we're going to make this larger. I'm going to highlight all this. Mesh, oops, mesh, reduce. Let's go down 25%. So as you can see, the shape is still there. It is starting to get a little boxy, and you can decide for yourself if you would prefer to actually have it be just a little bit more smooth. Maybe you could have reduced like 50%, or maybe even like 75%, and then just reduce 75, reduce 75, reduce 75 until it's just right. You know what I mean? So you can see that already, you know, we've saved all these extra vertices, and we've maintained the quality of the overall shape. And if this were a low poly mesh, you're going to be looking at it from about this far away. So really, you know, you don't need to worry about that. It's only when you get in close, like if you were doing a cutscene or something like that, where you would actually want to have all this detail. Now let me just show you. Let's say that we were being lazy about this, okay? And so we just wanted to highlight the whole face and go mesh, reduce, 5%. Alright, so already we have a problem, right? In that you can see where the eye is here, and let me just take away the wireframe, right? Look how this side is very androgynous. It has no real features to it. Yes, there is a point here for the nose, but, you know, like this cheek is completely out of place. These are the problems that come up if you were to just grab the entire thing and go mesh, reduce to whatever. You know, even if it was 25%, it would still look pretty lame. And so that's why I like to actually go in here and do these things by hand, all right? Now here's another, for instance, where you're going to have some problems with your relax tool. And this is just part of doing modeling in general, okay? Let's say that I wanted to reduce this area of what is clearly high to medium poly. We're going to go to reduce, and I'm just going to go, we'll try 50%. We can do a little better than that. Let's try another 90. I just want to get some of those. Yeah, that's good. Now, Control R again. Relax, 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 relax. But now you see that part of the relaxation process has actually deformed the bottom of the foot. And this is going to be a problem later, because if this sprite was actually standing on solid ground, it would want to tip over, because you really need it to be flat down here. So what you're going to have to do is actually go back in here and get it just right. And then we're going to use our rectangle tool, because it doesn't matter if it goes all the way to the back, and actually that's preferred. Mesh, fit to plane ortho, and that will flatten the foot again. Now obviously you can noodle around with this a little bit more, and there could be easily, you know, like if I really fix this up, then, you know, I would actually jack these all up so that it was nice and flat, totally flat on the bottom. Another place where you want details is here at the end of the foot. It doesn't matter what's back here. You could actually reduce all of that. Mesh, reduce, and we'll do 25. And here we also don't need to. Now I would like to have maybe a little bit more detail there, but you can compare it to the other foot. You know, from a distance, it's a foot. You know what I mean? And it only has, would appear to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I mean, you're looking at maybe 20, 25 faces just in the foot. And that's more than reasonable. You can actually go a little bit lower than that if you wanted to really kind of noodle around with it. Anywhere where you don't need any detail at all, for instance, underneath of armpits and on rib cages, you just want to dump down to as massively low polys as possible. So we'll go reduce to, let's say, 10%. And we're going to double check that to make sure that that's all right. And then actually what I'm going to do is do this one too. Mesh reduce to 10%. Alright, so you can see all of these faces are real nice and low poly. And it still maintains the curve. So from a distance, even from this distance, it's still going to be okay. So that's the idea here, is that ideally what you want to do is you want to actually go through and you want to say, alright, this area is flat, so we do not need any more than is absolutely necessary in terms of edges. So we'll go down to 5. And then this area, we want to maintain that curve, so maybe we don't want to go that far down. We'll reduce to, let's say, 50%. And then Control R to smooth it out. There you can see it gives you a real nice curve and maintains the same curve as the bosom on the other side, right? But it still starts to go low poly. And then underneath, because we don't need anything there, we can wipe all this out as well. Whoops. Mesh reduced 10%. Now again, just like with all of the other models that I've been making, you can actually mirror this. So if you go into Mesh Mirror, it will move everything over to the other side. And you can start to see, if we pull this back, there really is very little that we would actually have to clean up. I would want to clean up this triangular intersection here. But really, I mean, that's just a matter of going in and then select those just like that. And that will actually begin to then create a stomach instead of that, you know, crazy triangular thing that we had going there. Now that's much better. And if you wanted it to be even more, there's also the mesh refined by curvature. You can add instead of subtracting. So reduce would be to remove vertices and edges. Curvature is if you want to actually add vertices and edges. And again, at each step along the way, you should actually uncheck wireframe, check your entire model, make sure that you haven't deformed it in some way, especially when you're working on things like armpits and stuff like that. You're going to want to make sure that, you know, like these little stragglers and things, you know, as long as they don't wreck what you're trying to do. Again, if you're far enough away, it doesn't really matter. But if this NPC decided to wave or something like that, so her arm goes up here, then you're going to see that. You're going to see those extra vertices. So that's something to keep in the back of your mind. What is she doing? Is she just an NPC that's wandering around and she's not doing anything? Or is she an active NPC that, you know, you're going to have to check all of these little things to make sure? One of the other things is here in the hands, okay? You can see that I welded all the fingers together because she's not going to point or anything like that. And we're going to, let's do this, wireframe. Here, all I want to do is I just want to leave the edge of the thumb, the round part, right, so that it doesn't become like a point, and also the edge of where the fingers are, okay? And then I also want to reduce all of this. I like to leave these little extra vertices here because those are the vertices that I've identified as being ones that I want, okay? I want this edge loop to kind of be here. It would be easier for me later when I actually bring it in the blender. But for right now, oops, I didn't mean to do that. Let's do that. All right, mesh, reduce, and we're gonna take this one real easy because I don't want to deform this at all. So we'll just do 50, and then we'll try it again at 50. Control R to move them all into place. And that looks pretty good. I actually might want to go a little bit lower, but I think for right now, for our purposes, we're good to go. I think that looks alright. It's a little blocky, but I'm still okay with it. Because again, from this distance, you can't really tell. You can't really tell the difference. And especially since when you throw on a mesh or some textures and things like that, it'll all work out. Alright, now here's some advanced strategy in terms of trying to make sure that this model comes out just right, okay? The way that I built this model is that her her back is kind of arching, okay, and then her shoulders are nice and flat. So what I want to do is I want to do these as two separate dump downs. All right, I'm going to do this one first. So I'm going to do mesh reduce all the way down to 10%. And then I'm going to do this one. Mesh reduce. And this one I'm just going to do 25 just to see what it looks like. And I can relax that. And what I do want to do is I just want to hit this, mesh reduce, and we can go 25 here. Alright, and remember mesh mirror to make sure that both sides are the same. Alright, and so the last piece is just going to be the head here. I want to try to maintain as much of the, as much of the detail as is possible. I'm just going to relax that. So this is low poly, right? And then we're going immediately into this medium poly area, which will maintain the shape of the eyes. And go straight across here. Mesh reduce 10%. Also, we want down here. Mesh reduce 5%. And again, we want to always double check, make sure that nothing has deformed or gotten very weird or anything like that. I think that still looks really good. I mean, obviously without any hair and things like that, it's a little bit difficult to gauge, you know, exactly what you'll be able to see in terms of details. But from a distance, you know, if this was a poly in the background, you could go even lower than that if you wanted to. But even up to right here, you know, this still looks good. You don't see any boxiness, and you get good detail in the face that really kind of drives home what it is that you're looking for. Another thing to keep in mind is that there is no way for you to do any edge loops or to do any sort of, like for instance, when you're boning something, you want to actually have, like where the joints are, you want to actually set up appropriate joints that will bend in such a way that it won't deform. And there is no real way to say, I want an edge loop right here to prevent deformation. So that is one of the limitations of Curvy 3D. However, obviously, with something like this, you could literally highlight this in Blender and have it done in, you know, less than 2 or 3 minutes. So it's not such a big deal for that, but, you know, I figured I'd mention it. It is something that, you know, sadly, this program just isn't able to do that. Much in the same way that, you know, you can't hold down shift and then, you know, like have it, you know, like turn vertices and things like that. You can't turn them 40 degrees, 45 degrees or 90 degrees or anything like that, you know. So there are some things that are missing from this program. But for the most part, going from high poly to low poly isn't such a big deal. There are a couple places where, like in here, I could probably, you know, actually go in and, you know, just kind of give it one of those. We'll wipe all this out. Right, something like that. And then just go mesh, cap holes. And then we want to go mesh mirror. And, you know, you could fiddle around with each of the individual vertices at this point, because now that it's that low poly, you could actually pick them out using the mask brush. But I'm not going to get into all that. Basically, what I did was I went to File and then Export, and I exported it as a .obj file. And then I took that into Blender in order to get a poly count, because this Curvy 3D doesn't actually tell you how many polygons and faces and things like that there are. In this case, there were 2,856. That is a little high for a low poly, and the reason for that is because of this eye area here. I could easily do a little bit more work here, but I think just basically to give you an understanding of what it is that I'm looking for, you know, and how you would actually go about doing this, you know, I think we're okay. Also, the thumbs got a little messed up. That would be something that I would actually fix in Blender. Also, if we go into what would be the crotch area, you can see that this could easily be dumped down to be a little bit better. This could be just one giant poly if we really wanted it to be. But anyway, I think that's going to be it for this video. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please click the like button or subscribe to my YouTube channel for more content like this in the future. I'm Angelic Mayhem, and I'll see you next time.